Hello everyone, in this video I want to show you how you can build a really simple chat app inside of React Native using Socket.io. And the reason why we're starting to build this chat app is sort of to give you a basic introduction to Socket.io. I think that building a small chat app is a really good introduction into using WebSockets and Socket.io. So in the next section, I'm going to talk a little about why actually we are using Socket.io and not something like REST instead. So I turned my camera down on the table because I want to draw a little and explain to you why we actually are using Socket.io instead of something like REST. So in a normal REST situation, you would have a client here. Let's say we have a phone here that is asking a REST API for some chat messages or location. So let's say we have a location, like we have an Uber app, a taxi app, and we ask for a location of the driver. So locations. So we have a endpoint that is called API/locations. Now the client has to ask all the time our server, hey, is there a new location? Is there a new location? Is there a new location? Like every second, maybe. Every second. And instead of having the server telling the client that the location has updated or there's a new chat message, the client is keeping on asking the server, is there a new chat message in the room? Is there a new location? Is there this? Is there that? And keep asking all the time. Is there something? It's sort of like calling up a company all the time. Hey, is there any news? And you keep on calling the receptionist. Is he back now? Is the person back again? Instead of the person calling back to you when they come back to the office. That's another example I have. Instead, what is the better way is that you can push an update to the client. So that's using REST, this example here. That's REST. Now instead we have something where we have a client here and they have a WebSocket connection to our server. So this is our server here. That's our server. We can have it in Node.js, in any sort of language, but it's using WebSockets instead. So we have WebSocket. And then all of a sudden, let's say, we have a driver who has a new location and we want to display the new location on the phone. Then we can, as a server, we can push an update to the client while we have a WebSocket connection between the client and the server. So instead of the client constantly asking the server, hey, is there a new location? Is there a new location? And even if there's no updates, now we can update the client and say, hey, there's a new connection. Here you go. Instead, and again, if our driver here gets a new location, they can just send the new location to the server. And then the server sends the new location to the client here. So that's using WebSockets instead. WebSockets basically mean that you, as a server, can push updates to your clients. If you're using something like REST, the only thing you can do as a client is to push updates to the server and ask for new updates. You can get post, put, and so on, but the server can't contact the client. It's a one-way thing. It's only you who can talk with the server. But this enables you to push updates such as chat messages, locations to the clients. So that's using WebSockets. There's a raw WebSocket implementation you can use both in React Native and in browsers. However, I would recommend that you use some kind of wrapper for it. And that's what we use socket.io for. So it's a wrapper implementation for WebSockets, which makes it a lot easier for you to use WebSockets. And they have some fallbacks, such as if you lose the WebSocket connection, they go back to sort of a polling mode, sort of like REST instead, if you lose the WebSocket connection. So lots of good features in it, and it makes it easier to use WebSockets rather than using raw WebSockets. So that's what we're going to be using, is Socket.io for this. I hope this cleared it out why we are using WebSockets now and what purpose this technology or problems it is solving. Now on to the next section, we're going to start with our project, and then we're going to start implementing both our backend server with the Socket.io and the client which is connecting to our backend in Node.js. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is I'm going to make a folder. I'm going to call it taxi app for now because we're going to in the end make a taxi app. Well, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it chat app. I don't care. It's just a name. And we go and make a directory called taxi app. And I'm going inside the directory. Then I'm going to use React Native init and say mobile. So it's going to make a new folder inside of taxi app that's called mobile, where we will be having our mobile client. And once that is done, we're going to make a backend folder as well. Now we are going to make a backend folder. So I'm still in the taxi app directory and I make a backend folder. Then I go inside of the backend folder and then I can say npm init --yes. And then I'm going to say yarn add express. I'm trying to follow the documentation inside of Socket.io. So just Socket.io you can go on to, and using the get started. They have a pretty good tutorial for you to get started and make a Socket.io chat app just for the web only. And I recommend you try and follow that if you want to. And you can use this to also be creating the chat app for React Native if you follow along here also. So you can try and follow this tutorial if you want to first. I was having a little issue with this part, especially. It didn't work so well for me. So I found some help online and I did a little modification for it so it works for me. So anyway, we're going to add the Socket.io dependency as well. So express and Socket.io. Okay. Now we're going to open the directory inside of Visual Studio Code. So here we have the React Native client in mobile and the Node.js inside of backend. So I'm going to make a index.js file in here, and now we're going to start importing all of our Socket.io stuff and Express stuff, and we're going to build our application basically. Now we're going to say const express require express. This is the express package for building usually APIs and stuff. Then we're going to have const app, which is just express. You call here, then server, require HTTP, create server app. And we say const io, require socket.io, and listen, and we pass in the server here. And then we want to set a port here to port 3000. Now we can say IO on connection. We get a callback here with a socket object. And we can say console log a user connected. And we're happy. So then we need to say server listen. We pass in the port. And we have this little console log here to show that the server is running on the port. And you pass in port here like that. That's it. That's how you make a socket IO server. Super basic. Of course, it's not going to do a lot besides making a console log with a happy face when the user connects, but we can use this to start building on. Let's try and see how it runs. If it runs, that's also always a good start. Now I will go inside of the backend folder and I will say nodemon index.js. If you don't have nodemon installed, then you can just say npm I chi nodemon. Nodemon is good because it's going to automatically run the application or start it up again if I have to make a change. Like I have to make a space here or a semicolon. So if I save it now, it's going to start up the app again. So I don't have to type node index.js all the time. That's why I use nodemon. Anyway, we got our backend running already. And now we just need to start using the client inside of React Native so we can see a console log we should see when we start out our React Native app. Now we're going to start running the React Native app, and I'm just going to start it up in Android. You can also start it up in iOS. That is fine. It's going to work either way. So I will go inside of the mobile directory with the React Native application that we initialized with React Native int, React Native run Android, and it should start compiling and it will start running on the emulator. First, let's go inside of the app.js. Now that the application is running on our emulator, let's remove the comments here in app.js and other things we don't need, like this instruction here. The props we remove here. And that's it. So now we just cleaned it up a little bit and we can reload it. It's still working. Now we can add the socket.io client dependency to our React Native app. So that's going to be a bit different from our Node.js client. It is going to be socket.io client instead of just socket.io because we only need the client. And now we can import it over here. So we say import IO from socket.io client. And now we can start using it inside of the React Native app. Now we are actually going to connect to the socket.io server. So we have imported IO from the package here. Let's go inside of the component did mount method. And we say IO HTTP. And this is where we put in our local IP address. You cannot use localhost and the port. That doesn't work for some reason on the mobile app. So if you refresh the app here, you will not see any user connected string here. You need to use the IP of your local IP. So go inside. I'm on a Mac. If you're on Mac or Linux, you can use ifconfig. If you're on Windows, you can use ipconfig. So ifconfig I'm going to use and find my local IP that is here, 192.27. So I will copy that in here. and that's my local IP. Now I save this and I go in here where we are running our backend, and I will try and refresh it. And we see that it says a user connected. So this means that we got a connection to our Socket.io server in here inside of the component.mount function. I have seen some examples with people doing connections inside of the constructor instead, and you should not do that. You should not use the constructor like that. You should not have any asynchronous functions going on inside of the constructor in React. You should try to keep that inside of the component.mount function. So just keep that in mind if you happen to come across an example that is doing something inside of the constructor with Socket.io. You should keep those asynchronous functions inside of component.mount instead. That's just best practice overall, and that's what the React Native and React team is recommending you do. Now, with that, we are going to next go and make some text box in here and somewhere we can display the text messages and actually send a text message to the Socket.io server. So now we are at the point where we have a connection to the Socket.io server as soon as we launch our app or reload the app, but we are actually not writing any chat messages. We're just making a console log with a happy face when the user is connecting. Next step now is that we're going to build a little text input box for chat messages, and then we should be able to at least console log it inside of our Node.js server and see when we receive a chat message. So let's do that now. I'm going to remove this platform element here, which we're not using, and replace it with text input. Then I am going to remove these two blocks of text here, and I'm going to put in a text input element, and we'll say autocorrect to false because that's annoying to have. And we're going to have a onChange text, which we set here, and that's just going to set our chat message state inside of the app. So set state, and we say chat message, and we set the state of our chat message by default to the blank up here, like that. So we have a chat message state, which is just a string, and that's what we're setting inside of the text input element. And now let's just also set a background style on this text input. So styles, I will just give it an inline style in here with a height of 40, and I will say border width 2. And then we should be able to see the text box. You can see it here. It is pretty small and in the middle, but if you remove these two, justified content and align items, we should be able to see it at least up at the top, just like that. And that's it. Now I'm also going to remove the two styles here, welcome and instructions, because we're not using them anymore. So I will move those. And yeah, I think that is about it for now. Also, I'm going to have a on submit editing. So that's when we are pressing enter basically inside of the chat box. What are we going to call? We're going to call this submit chat message. It's a function we're going to make now. Okay, and then we're going to set the value of this text box to be the state of chat message. So as we are pressing in text inside of the chat box, it's going to change the chat message state to be some kind of chat message we are writing. Then when we press enter to submit the chat message, it's going to call the function submit chat message, which we're going to write here and do something inside here. And inside this function, we're going to send the message to socket.io, and then we're going to clear the chat message state again. So inside of component.mount, we're not going to use const socket because we need to access this socket from anywhere inside of our app. So we need to, or inside of this component. So we need to do it like this .socket instead. Just like we have this .state, which we can access anywhere inside of our component, we can also make a this.socket and access the socket anywhere inside of our app or component. So we can say this.socket emit, and emit is going to submit an event to the socket.io server. So we can emit, for example, a chat message with the current chat message in this state. And once we emitted this chat message, we can just clear the state of the chat message. And it's going to be blank again inside of the chat box. Okay, I hope that is pretty clear to you. I mean, by now, this is pretty fairly basic React stuff, React Native stuff, and it should be okay, clear to you what's going on here. There's a little ES6 feature I'm using here. So instead of doing something like this, I can just do a basic shorthand and remove this one here because they have the same name. So, I mean, for now, it's this just basic React 6 or React and ES6 stuff we're doing here, except for we're doing this .socket .emit, which is emitting the chat message to the socket.io server. Anyway, let's see how it works. So now if I type something in here, test, whatever, and I press the green button here or return on iOS, then it's going to send the message and it's going to blank this one here. And now obviously nothing came up here in the console log because we haven't built a listener for this event we are emitting. So in order to listen for the chat message emit, we need to do a socket on chat message. And then we have a message object we get here. And then we can do a console log of the message. So now inside of the console log of the Node.js server, we should be able to see the chat message that I'm writing inside of the app. So let's see. This is from the app. And I press the return button here. And we get the message from the app inside of our Node.js index.js. So that is how you send an event via socket.io. Let's see what else we can do. Now, the next thing we need to do, of course, is to display some kind of chat message list here of all the chat messages we are receiving or the ones we are sending also. So we're going to do that in the next section. Now let's try and have a list of the chat messages displayed inside of the client, so it's not just displayed inside of the terminal of our Node.js server. We need an array of chat messages. So chat messages is just initialized as an empty array inside of the state. And now we are going to, let's see, we need to emit the chat message, which we do here. And then inside of the Node.js server, we emit the chat message to all of the sockets listening to our socket.io server. So then we say when we get the message, instead of just doing a console log, we say IO emit chat message, and we send the message. Now it's going to emit the chat message to all of the clients listening to this Socket.io server. And now we just need to write a listener for any events of this chat message. So here we are emitting the event, and now we need to write a listener for it. So we say this Socket.io on chat message, and we say message, and we do something with the message property or the object we get. So we say set state, and then we say chat messages array is equal to the chat messages array as it was before, using the spread operator, and then we say add messages on it. So this is using the spread operator from ES6 so that we can add the message element onto this array and return a new array with the added element, and that is then being set as the chat messages array. Now we need to add the element or the chat messages to our view itself. So we say const chat messages. We will do a map over the chat messages array. So for each chat message, we will return a text element containing the chat message. And yeah, if you are using React, you also need to set a key. Usually that's best practice for each element in an array. So I'm just going to be lazy here and set the key as a chat message. But in a real scenario, you would put it as a unique key or a unique ID that's, well, unique compared to a chat message. Now we need to put the chat messages. I will just put it down here below the text input, like that. And that should be it. So now we are sending a chat message here on the submit chat message. We submit the chat message, and we set the chat message to be clear here, so there's no text on the input here. Then the Node.js server receives the chat message, and it emits it again to all of the sockets that is listening on the server. Then inside the client, when we have this listener for a chat message event, and we add the chat message to our array. So now let's see if we reload the app here, if it's going to send or add the chat message in the below here. So we write test, and we see the test down here. So that is working all fine, like it's supposed to. And now let's try, and you can also try and deploy it to your own phone. And then you can try and send a message for your phone. And you should actually also see the message displayed inside of your emulator and vice versa. So let's try and do that. Now I got the app running on my phone, and I'm going to try and write a message from the phone and see if it comes up on the emulator. It's actually pretty hard to write without the autocorrect. So I wrote from phone, and you see it pops up on the emulator instantly, also inside of the Node.js console log. I don't know if you can see it, but so I can also write from the emulator 1, 2, 3, for example, and it pops up on the phone as well. Now, obviously, you can build onto this, and it's not going to make Facebook shut down Messenger anytime soon because you built this chat app. But the point is that you got a really good introduction into Socket.io on React Native. And you built a little simple server that is able to receive and send events to clients. Now, obviously, the next step you could do is you could build something where you have a username for the clients. So someone can enter in a username and they get this username assigned to them. You could also build something, well, you could make the layout better, of course. For now, it's just a list, and if it's going to be too long, it's not going to fit all of the chat. Also, you could save the previous chat messages into some kind of database, so that when someone connects to the chat room again, they get this list of databases. There's a lot of things you can build onto this, but the point has been so far just to give you a basic introduction to Socket.io, and I think this sort of chat app is a really good example of it. So thank you for watching this tutorial, and I hope you got something out of it. And if you have any more questions about this, Socket.io and so on, then let me know, and I will try to answer it best I can.